Hi, everybody. This is the video I promised to upload that we didn't get to during class. So I'm going to quickly go over functional articulation disorders, some helpful hints for you to try and remember. So functional articulation errors, disorders, you do not include more than one error sound in initial stages of therapy because usually they're trying to solidify how to make that sound, okay? Pay attention to the phonetic context of words. So if the child fronts a word like cat is harder than cap because cat has the ending P sound. So they may do that consonant harmony where they put the C to a T for tat, right? So you want to kind of be aware of that. It's a learned motor skill, so more practice is better. So you want to get as many trials in as you can. Persistent errors should be evaluated for oral motor difficulties to make sure you didn't miss anything. You can use books that contain target sounds as immersion activities, like Rotten Ralph for R, okay? And make sure to counsel parents to respond consistently to their child's utterances before pointing out speech errors or modeling correct production. Okay, so slide. So phonological disorders. Um, so this is an example. I was going to do this in class. A phonological processing error of a boy who's age 5. He presents with final consonant deletion. So he deletes S, V, P, D, and K. He also voices. So instead of saying the quiet sounds of P, T, S, and F, he says the louder sounds of B, D, Z, and B. He also has unstressed syllable deletion. So instead of telephone, he says tephone. Instead of away, he says way. Instead of potato, it's tato. Instead of ambulance, is ambulance. Okay. He also has initial consonant deletion. So he doesn't say ort, and he reduces clusters, very common. So instead of ST, he drops the S, SM, he drops the S, PL, he keeps the P but drops the L, SK, he drops the S, and N, he drops, this is at the end, he drops the D. He also has glottal replacement. So instead of TK and G, he has a glottal stop, which is like, so what would we address? Well, the first 5 patterns are exhibited by typically developing children, so they're developmental in nature. Process approach to intervention should be final consonant deletion, fronting, because both should be in by 3, voicing, and initial consonant deletion, because they have severe impacts on overall intelligibility. I would also work on the glottal stop because that's atypical. So you want to get rid of the glottal stop. Here are some sample activities using a visual picture to show the end of the sound. So like a dinosaur tail. Use bingo markers and 25 target pictures for naming monosyllabic words and having the both errors and ending sounds that can be produced and emphasizing that the tail is that they have to say the sound at the tail. Another fun game we've talked about it before is Go Fish. You can use it for anything. And you can use minimal contrast picture cards like bed and beg, pit and pick, date, ate, top, cop. Rhyming sentences to work on voicing. The child fills in the last word. The pig is big. Put the coat on the goat. And the reason that when we're doing phonological processing, addressing phonological processing errors, that we use these kinds of activities is because it can affect literacy. These are the kinds of errors that could affect literacy. So we want to try and build in some phonological awareness activities along with our treatment. Okay. So here's another, this one would be a girl. She Manner, she has manner errors, so she stops for fricatives. So instead of zoo, she's stopping the Z and saying do. Instead of soap, she's stopping the S and saying taupe. She's substituting fricatives for affricates. So instead of Porsche, she's saying porch. She says she glides her R. Instead of right, she's saying yite. And she also has errors in place. So she's saying take instead of cupcake, det, forget, fronting error. Alveolars for palatals. So instead of shoe, she's saying sue. Instead of treasure, she's saying treasure. And voice for voiceless, gow for cow, doe for toe. And then there's also voiceless for voiced, loose for lose, stove for stove. So you would think about a modified distinctive feature strategy, taking one from each feature. Manner, right, is earlier developing and frequency. Place, alveolar for velar, is age. And voicing, voice for voiceless, is usually an initial position and it affects overall intelligibility. So here's some sample activities. Make a game board with slides and ladders, almost like chutes and ladders, but have a slide or ladder on almost every square. Use the visual of the ladder to be small steps, stop sounds. Use the slide to help visualize fricatives. Model production for the child. You should have more ladders on the bottom and slides on the top. The last slide going back to 1 to indicate the child won, so that they feel like they won. Stop words produce 3. Fricatives produce 5. Have the child move the piece slowly down the slide, then move to the words, etc. You can have a racetrack board game with 20 squares with a small race car and a spinner. The car goes forward on green and backward with red number. Green sounds are TD, red sounds would be KG. You could play bingo depending on their level with bumblebees, like you could do the voice, and butterflies, quiet sound, stickers. You could have picture cards, name the picture, child says whether it's a butterfly or a bumblebee. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can ask me about it. So now we're on language intervention for children and adolescents. So language disorders. The definition is abnormal acquisition in the comprehension or use of spoken language. There's primary versus secondary. So primary language disability would be that they were born with it. Secondary would be that it was caused by something else. Developmental, again, born with versus acquired. And delayed versus atypical acquisition. So we'll have children who have just a slower rate of learning language, but they follow the same pattern, right? But then we also have children who acquire language different. Okay, so that's something that you need to think about. And there is a huge range of severity. So classification of language disorders. A receptive disorder is from auditory or visual messages. So they have difficulty deriving meaning from auditory or visual messages. And they may actually have a strength in the visual form of getting meaning and have a weakness in the auditory form of getting meaning, or vice versa. Expressive is combine linguistic elements to form meaningful messages. So they have difficulty with that. So here are some skill areas: semantics, vocabulary, morphology, which is the smallest unit with meaning, syntax, which is grammar, pragmatics, social skills, and phonology, which, as I mentioned before, affects literacy. The relationship between oral language and literacy. Oral language is the basis of reading and writing acquisition. As a matter of fact, I believe it's in Finland. They focus first on building oral language through play. Kids don't actually learn how to read, I don't think, until they're 7. I think it's 7. So oral language is a huge foundation for reading. It includes word recognition and comprehension, and that helps with understanding words and having a bigger vocabulary and knowing what they mean, helps with their ability to understand when they read. So emergent literacy, increasing awareness of print and functions of print. Metalinguistic awareness is explicit knowledge of and ability to manipulate components of the linguistic system independently of its meaning. So, phonological awareness skills like Pig Latin, and I have a link here to a video, I think, Fun with Pig Latin. This was not a video, actually. Well, there's a little video here. I did this in a second grade classroom, and it actually is a real way of letting kids have fun, but then really working on phonological awareness. Okay. And here's a scope and sequence for phonological awareness intervention. So this is the order in which it goes. So you guys have access to this as well. Okay. In these slides. All right. Our role in literacy intervention. ASHA's statement is that SLPs play a critical and direct role in the development of literacy for children and adolescents with communication disorders. One of the things that people don't think about is prevention. Participating in oral and written language experiences that facilitate literacy, like shared book reading, alphabet letter exposure, and modeling, may prevent learning disabilities and literacy disabilities later on. So this is something that I am passionate about, but it is something that may be in the future for speech pathology. Identification, we can identify children at risk, and we can screen for early detection. And we can also do assessments and diagnose. Intervention, you would use evidence-based instruction that emphasizes reciprocal relationships between oral language and theoretical models of intervention. There's behavioral, non-developmental approach, stimulus response, and consequence, generally for atypical patterns of language acquisition or severe profound intellectual impairment. Developmental strategies, you use the known sequence of acquisition. And again, I gave you milestones so you could see what the order is and by what age we should expect certain characteristics in speech and language. Okay. It's cognitively based, linguistically based, pragmatically based. Intervention with infants birth to 3. So when kids are really little, we really want to include parents. It's a developmental period marked by mastery of the following elements that underlie the acquisition of the linguistic system: cognitive behaviors, social behaviors, motor behaviors, communicative behaviors. And this is a program, Promoting Awareness of Speech Sounds program. It's called the PASS program. And so these are links. When you see these, this just gives you information about cognitive development, motor development. And this is just this program here. It's promoting awareness of speech sounds using rhyming, blending, and segmentation, and it gives you an example lesson. So it's just good information, basically, is why I put these things here for you. So you have a reference point for when you go to clinic or when you're in clinic. ASHA's early intervention guidelines. The goal is to develop basic skills critical to successful speech, language, and communication learning. We emphasize family education and involvement because they're the ones who are with the kids continuously, right? We're there for 30 minutes or an hour once a week or twice a week. We really want to get the family integrated into the process so they can do this stuff at home. They can read to their kids every night. There's so much to it. The guidelines, prevention, screening, evaluation, assessment, planning, implementing, monitoring, consultation, service coordination, transition planning, and advocacy. And it is a place where we work collaboratively with other team members. Usually there's other people at the table working with these little kids. Okay, young, very young children. Pre-linguistic and early language targets, localization, presenting sound stimulus outside the baby's visual field, see if they turn their head. Joint attention, which I think we all know about, right? Having the child look at you, look at the item, look at you. Mutual gaze, it's immediate parental response to the infant's initiation of eye contact, and it increases a baby's motivation. Joint action routines, fun, peekaboo, patty cake, I'm gonna get you, right? Gestures, 9 to 18 months, vocalizations, talking to infants, singing, humming, sound gesture games like peekaboo and the above. Communicative intentions, you can introduce toys that require help, place toys out of reach, like you could put bubbles way up high and they may want it, so you want them to ask you for it, or put covers on too tight. Wind up toys that they love, but they can't wind, so you want them to ask for you to wind it. Another one that they like is like you push something down and it pops up. So those are just things that you can use, way to introduce communicative intentions. And non-symbolic play and symbolic play, right? So they can make up stuff with things that aren't representative, or playing, knowing, they take the spoon and they feed the doll with it and things like that. Cooking. Cooking is one of the best. It's such a good language-based activity. Initial vocabulary, first lexicon, use target words repeatedly in play. That's how they gain their vocabulary. They need repetition. So now intervention with children 3 to 5, developmental period is marked by rapid vocabulary growth, utterance length increases, onset of syntax acquisition, morphological forms emerge. There's a lot going on between 3 and 5, and sometimes it's when you'll hear the typical disfluency, because all of this is happening so fast that sometimes you'll hear some typical developmental disfluency during this time. They understand and produce a variety of simple and complex sentences. And usually the general rule of thumb is 2 words at 2, 3 words at 3. Treatment approaches for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Focus stimulation, provide concentrated exposure to a target form in a variety of natural adult child contexts, generally for receptive language. Incidental teaching, naturalistic approach, encouraging child to communicate by manipulating the environment. We talked a little bit about putting things on too tight and wind up toys and that kind of stuff. Floor time, developmental, individual difference relationship based, or DIR, encourages socially appropriate child-initiated interactions with emphasis on developmental milestones and family. Selective mutism, that's when a child is capable of speech but does not talk in certain situations. It's characteristics they think might be social phobia. Usually it occurs in children 5 years or younger. Usually they're anxious or very shy. Sometimes they'll just kind of look at you with a blank stare. A little bit more tight in their body language. They're more rigid. We can work with them to make talking more comfortable by trying to encourage them to talk with a comfort person and gradually add less familiar people, even if they start off with a whisper. Shaping would be for a child who points, the SLP will add a gesture, then pair the gesture with a word and prompt the child to mouth the word. We had a child come in here who had selective mutism, and she was a little older, and we used the communication device, and she would use the device. So whatever the reason for her not speaking, at least she had a form of communication. So you just kind of have to think outside the box. You usually would need to want to work with a psychologist, psychiatrist, somebody who can address the anxiety piece of the selective mutism. Okay. Emergent literacy intervention. The goal is to promote oral and print knowledge, foundational skills for learning to read and write. There's a significant reciprocal relationship between early intervention and academic achievement. Here are some examples. Shared book reading and sense of story, knowing the beginning, middle, and end of a story with the character, helping kids to understand how the character is feeling. Why are they feeling that way? You can just talk about all of that. Building some phonological awareness. You can do some rhyming games, segmenting games, alphabetic letter name and sound knowledge. Kids love to know their name, even if they don't know the letters, it's okay. And adult modeling of literacy. Experience with writing materials, different, you can use crayons, you can use colored pencils, you can use sand, um, uh, um, shaving cream. Okay. Early intervention, 18 months. So, I'm going to skip this because it's a profile. Maybe we can do it in class if we have time. Okay. You can read this. The whole objective of this was to have you guys read it and then make a strategy and then we could talk about it a little. But this is a profile and then the clinical strategy with the EI professional team and what we did, what would be done. Okay. And why. Okay. And I think the next one might be an example as well. Oh, here's some helpful hints. Incorporate motherese or child-directed speech that's exaggerated intonation, short utterance length, simple vocabulary and syntax, frequent repetition, and topics related to the here and now. So like my son just had a baby. So when I'm on FaceTime with him, I'm like, hi, it's Mimi. My tone is higher and it's just something you kind of do more naturally. You don't talk I'm not gonna talk to a child that's 18 months old the way I'm talking to you guys, right? I'm gonna use more simple sentences so that I'm modeling the beginning of language structure. So you can use something called turnabouts. If the child says that, the clinician says, yes, that's a kitty cat. What does a kitty cat say? So kind of taking the information, that they're trying to say cat, right? So you can elaborate and then see if and then ask the child a question so that you're kind of having a conversation. And then this is a pretty nifty little chart that I think I might have gotten from the book, but it's good developmental toys so that you can think about what to use for clinic, right? Up to 60 months. So we have this up to age 5. So this is a nice thing that you may want to look at later. Okay. You need to be aware of any concomitant impairment so that intervention accommodates infants' overall developmental profile or even a child's developmental profile, right? And parent input is so important. I know I've said that 100,000 times, but it is. You really want to focus on what they want their child to be able to do or what their hopes are for their child. So here's another profile. Kind of skip this. It's a 3-year-old with moderate delays. So what would therapy targets look like? Here they are. I'm not going to read this yourself. Okay. So sample activities, gather 20 common objects that the child knows. Develop a list of 10 2-step commands, each with 4 linguistic elements like verb plus object constructions. Place 3 objects at a time in front of the child and verbally state the direction. Pick up the car and give me the shoe. Give me the cup and push the car. You can make it more fun too by making that into a game of sorts, with like a bingo marker or this is the same similar thing. Try to use 2 to 3 utterances that are topically related for meaningful context, like open juice, pour juice. This would be maybe you'd be using a kitchen set, right? Kickball, roll ball. You could do bowling. And you could just keep saying, let's roll the ball, roll ball, right? And see if they'll say it. You can use a theme toy like a farm and put the animals around the farm and like instruct the child to put one of the animals in the house and ask, where is the horse, right? So stuff like that. Oh, you can do a simple story, The 3 Little Bears, and use a bear routine. We can talk about that after. So here's another profile of a 5-year-old with the therapy targets here. You guys can just look at this. I've got all the information on the slide. And here's sample activities, picture cards again that show things like he is drinking on various Candyland color backdrops. When the child chooses a picture, model the sentence and have him or her imitate it. Again, you can have more picture cards with regular plurals like dogs, cats, shoes, and then set them up like a memory board. And the child can flip over a card and the clinician can model, I see two dogs, right? Trying to see if the kid can say the plural. You can teach what a rhyme is, use Jenga blocks, use one syllable color cards, red, blue, black, gray, white, green. Lay them face down. Child turns over a card and names the color. Clinician names a rhyming word. Then clinician and child switch roles, right? So red, bed, lead, fed, blue shoe, voodoo, black sack. So you're trying to get them to think of a word that rhymes. It doesn't even have to be a real word. You can tell them it can be a fake word. Depending, of course, all of these depend on the child's level, right? So helpful hints, useful to teach agent plus action and action plus object semantic relations sequentially because it provides the transition to three-word. I want to encourage families to engage children in activities to promote emergent literacy. So giving the families information when they come in is also a really great idea. Um, like read aloud to the child and showing them how to read a story. And you can have the child draw some pictures to go with it and then have the child tell you about the story. Why did you draw those pictures? What did they show about the story? Right? Giving parents good questions to ask. Have the child plan a party for 4 to 6 people. Use food section of newspaper for ideas on what to serve. Encourage parents to allow children to make letters in sand or soap. Like I said, I think before shaving cream, right? They can go to the beach in the summer and they can make letters they can have a stick. There's all kinds of things you can do. Um, Sound activity calendar, like on Monday, tell me 3 words that start with B, right? Or book. It may be more effective to repeat or expand than to directly correct. That's another thing to tell parents too. Um, Sometimes it's better to just model. And because kids get annoyed, if you correct them every 2 seconds, they're not going to listen to you at all, right? So just model, just repeat it back and show them the model. And that's good because it's feedback. All right. And encourage parents to use daily activities to practice 1 and 2 step directions, like cooking, right? Cooking with your child, have, whatever, if they're doing chores, if they're at dinner and they want milk, you could say, oh, can you get yourself the chicken, whatever it is. Right? Guide parents to realistic perceptions of their child's skills. So obviously, if, we have a child that's significantly delayed and the parents like, okay, well, I want them to go to Harvard. You can't be like, okay, well, we'll get him there, you have to kind of be honest. But professional, we're going to have him make gains, he can go to college, hopefully we'll be able to get him to go to college, whatever. I've had parents with some, interesting. I think I had one who I don't know if you guys had to ever take them, but the 1 minute math test, like, multiplication, you have to do whatever in a minute. So I had a parent come in and say that his child needed extended time for the 1 minute math test, because with extended time, he could get them all right. And I was like, well, so could the entire class, you know? So kind of losing the point of that 1 minute was that it was to build fluency in that skill. So it's kind of interesting. Pair new vocabulary words with the print version to promote literacy as well. Okay. So intervention for language in school-age children through adolescence. Oral language vocabulary increases in size and depth. The utterance length increases. Syntactic growth. There's an increased growth of low-frequency structures. Metalinguistic awareness. Reading, decoding, knowledge of letter sound correspondence. Often in 3rd grade, you hear that children go from learning to read to reading to learn, right? So if they aren't ready to use the skills to be able to read to learn, they're going to fall behind pretty quickly. Word recognition and fluency, rapid automatic identification of words, comprehension, processes that printed language is understood. And in writing, they're learning to spell, forming words from letters, written composition. They're writing at the text level, including planning, drafting, revising, and editing. So a lot goes on in the school during this time period. So intervention for school age children through adolescence, second half, 10 to 18. So early adolescence, you promoting communication skills for academic and social purposes. Mid-adolescence, it's for vocational purposes. If they're still receiving speech and language therapy in 14 to 16 years old, it's usually that the communication skills they need are for their job or for their vocation. And the same for late adolescents for career purposes. Communication skills are refined, significant development of higher order language abilities, significant growth, typical developing children in meta-linguistic area of figurative language and conversational maturity, and the utterance length is completely increased to, multiple embedded clauses. And they've increased their comprehension and production. There's also advances in written language and development of metacognitive. Intervention considerations for school-age children and adolescents. Intervention focus, relationship between oral language and literacy. Goals are to address demands and expectations of the educational curriculum. Common Core state standards, and they're developed to improve college and career readiness, and defined set of increasingly complex standards that are internationally benchmarked. So if anybody is interested, I do have rubrics by grade of the Common Core state standards that I made while I was working in order to keep my therapy in line with what children needed to know to be successful students. That's why I made it. So if you're interested, reach out. Treatment approaches, previewing. So planning strategy for oral and written texts. So previewing before the class is going to do social studies, say, preview that narrative with the child so that they actually have some background. Have them try to guess. Have them to use their knowledge to make a prediction. Think aloud strategies. Engage in self-talk to improve comprehension. Know, want to know, and learn. So this is something that educators use a lot, and it's like 3 columns. And let's say there's a word, right? Let's say I'm going to make one up, like, oh, maybe it won't. Ubiquitous. I can't even say it, but whatever. Anyway, so then you would put what you know about the word. The child would write what they know. What they don't, go look it up. It's just in their head. What they know, if they don't know anything, then they write, I have no information about this word. What I want to know about this word. And then in the end, they talk about what they learned about the word. So it's kind of a self-reflective, metacognitive type of activity. And you can use, some kids need some maps, right? Like a writing map, and discussion, like conversation about meanings. And also for kids who have difficulty with pragmatic language, social stories are helpful. Computer-driven therapy, use of personal computers to present therapeutic stimuli and feedback can be helpful. Okay. So instructional strategies for reading, think, plan, write. Think about who will read this, plan what to say, write, say more. Peer-mediated teaching, brainstorm background knowledge, discuss explain steps, memorize and rehearse, and make sure that teaching them to make sure they support what they're saying. And hopefully they can then perform this independently after you've had all of this modeling for them and supports built in. Okay. So this is about teaching by genre of expository text, like compare, contrast, cause, effect. Teaching compensatory strategies. Maybe they need some assistive technology to supplement explicit instruction. And then the computer-driven therapy, personal computers or other electronic devices present stimuli and feedback. They also can do, what's the program? It actually can read to them while they're typing so they know if they're making mistakes. It can read to them if they can't read it themselves. It can, the child can speak it if they can't type it, and it'll type up what they say. And so this is another case study that I'm not gonna go over. You can read this yourself. And that's it, you guys. That's the end of the slide. This is all the information I told you about that's at the end about cleft palate. And it gives you ideas for therapy and all kinds of information. I just wanted you to have it, but I don't feel like I need to go over it. Hearing impairments, um, and some sample activities for that as well. Okay. So your job this week is to do the HIPAA. I'm just flicking through this while I talk. So your job this week is to do um, your HIPAA certification. And I will see you guys the week after the 18th, and that will be your first clinical experience. Don't forget, the week of the 18th, we expect you in the clinic, either observing from the window or in the room with your supervising person so that you get to know your client or really get a good observation of them. Okay? And thanks, guys.